Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out on this unusually cold April evening for the board meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Now, if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll when you're ready, please.
Mr. Nichols. Ms. Pritchard.
Aye. Here.
Mr. West.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nichols is ill this evening, and that is why he's not here. We hope that he feels better soon. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last board meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 21st meeting.
Second.
Any questions, comments, changes to these minutes? Hearing none?
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, are there any additions, removals, or modifications to this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion. We approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. West. Roll, please.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Sable, if you are ready for your items.
Good evening, and we have several items to share with the board as well as the community this evening. And it is my pleasure to welcome our athletic director, Mr. Hodke, here this evening. It feels like we've been on a couple-year hiatus from celebrations and recognitions in the district due to the pandemic. And I'm excited for us to have the opportunity to get back to the opportunities of recognizing our students, staff, and their accomplishments. So it's with great pleasure and pride that I invite Mr. Hodke up here this evening to recognize our gymnastics team and their outstanding accomplishment this season.
Thank you, Mr. Sable, Board of Education. Appreciate the invite. It is a privilege and an honor to be here this evening. Obviously, as Mr. Sable said, we haven't had the opportunity to celebrate as much in the past few years, but there's still been a lot of success going on in our athletics, extracurriculars, and everything that goes on here at Medina City School District. And one of the most recent would be our gymnastics team. This past March, they earned and were rewarded with the state runner-up trophy that is right here next to me. This is the third time in school and program history that they have done so in the 2005, 2006, and now in 2022. So this will be the third runner-up trophy that we've been able to add to our trophy case here at Medina. And to put it into perspective of what runner-up means, the same school, the Brecksville-Broadview Heights Bees, have actually won this trophy 19 years in a row in gymnastics. So it's to be runner-up to such a tradition that is at Brecksville is pretty amazing, and we had them on the run this year. The girls, unbelievable effort on a Friday evening. We went down to Hilliard Bradley High School, beautiful campus there, and the girls earned that berth by going by 5th place at the districts the week before. And to put in perspective what gymnastics in the state of Ohio is, 12 teams make it to the state tournament down in Hilliard. 6 of them come from Northeast Ohio because of the number of schools that have gymnastics in Northeast Ohio. At the district meet at Mentor, the girls finished in 5th place, which was enough to earn their spot in state for, I believe it was the 3rd or 4th year in a row. The same 6 teams that come from Northeast Ohio and the other 6 that come from the rest of the state, usually Northeast Ohio places 5 or 6 in the top 6 at state. Tells you how competitive that the district is here in Northeast Ohio. As I said, the girls were 5th behind a couple other schools. They performed the meet of their lives on that Friday in March down at Hilliard, and it was spectacular. A meet down there for the state meet lasts 5 hours. Just amazing what they were able to accomplish, going from 5th place and basically overturning 2 to 3 other teams to go 2nd place and almost beat Brecksville. Not just a distant second. I think there was a point where Brecksville was very scared that they may have lost their first state championship in 18 years. But just amazing. The tradition and legacy of our gymnastics program, Coach Darcy Rinaldo, her assistants Mary Jane Otto and Jen Lewis, excuse me, just spectacular what they do with these young ladies. And again, it's just one of our programs here, but it's one that is very well decorated and represents us in a very positive manner, and has done so over these many years. And again, on that Friday, it was just one of those things. The parents were there. Like I said, a 5-hour meet. I think we stayed after for another hour, just celebrating. We were the last ones out of that building, and it was just amazing to be able to celebrate that. And the girls deserve all that credit, and we want to make sure they get up here, and those that are in attendance tonight can get the recognition that they deserve for all the hard work they put in, not only during the season and during that meet, but all throughout the year, because it is a year-round sport. So if those young ladies would like to come up so they can introduce themselves to the group.
Hi, my name is Madeline Dayton, or as everyone on our team calls me, Blue. I am one of our 2 seniors this year, and I've been on this team for 4 years, and I've been to the state meet 3 years in a row. So, yeah. I competed on the floor event.
I'm Macy Maxworthy. I'm a junior. This is my 3rd year on the team, and I competed in all around.
I'm Colleen Johnson. I'm a junior, and this is my 3rd year, and I competed in all around as well.
I'm Madison Lee. I'm a sophomore. This was my 1st year on the team, and I competed all around.
I'm Amelia Talbert, and this is my 1st year. I'm a sophomore, and I got a chance to compete on vault.
And again, this is about just a little less than half of the team. There were some other events going on this evening, so some people couldn't make it. But again, what these ladies have done, and again, what they have continued to do with the tradition and legacy of the gymnastics program is just amazing. So again, thank you for allowing us to present them, recognize them, and continue the great things that are going on here at Medina High School. Thank you.
I just wanted to congratulate you again, girls, and thank you for taking the time to come here tonight. I know it's a busy time with spring, and we do appreciate you coming out, and congratulations on the rewards of all your hard work. Good luck next year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Hodke, I need to know, where's that huge trophy going? Is that going right in the middle of your desk?
It has been sitting on the main, our athletic office desk, along with all the other clutter on my desk. It just wouldn't fit. But we have a great trophy case. We put in a couple trophy cases, and it is going to be right next to those other state championship and state runner-up trophies that we have right outside the gym. So that's where it'll be starting next fall. Right now, it's in our office on display there. So,
well, thank you very much, Mr. Hodke, and to our student athletes. I'm proud of you. Thank you for coming this evening. It's really good to see you here at the meeting tonight.
Thank you, parents, too. Thank you.
Next up, I think it's important that our board and our community sees the kind of work that we have going on within our district. We've tried very hard over the last 5 years to really be leaders when it comes to curriculum and instruction. Not only ensuring that our students within Medina City Schools are receiving the highest level of academics, but that we are also collaborating and being leaders amongst the state as well as the nation in regards to the curriculum and instruction that is occurring across the country. And that includes providing leadership and guidance to other district as well as other educators. So I'm happy this evening to invite our Department of Instruction to present this evening on some initiatives they have coming up with statewide and national presentations. So I'd like to invite up Mrs. Cassidy.
Well, that was a hard act to follow, but we are pretty excited about some of the things that we have going on in our department. And first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Jackson, who is our Director of Curriculum for Elementary, and she is going to talk about an exciting opportunity that we have to present some of our 21st century learning experiences at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which is a national conference in Cleveland this summer. So, Sarah.
Good evening. Thank you, Tina. I appreciate the chance to share with the board an exciting opportunity that we do have to highlight the work of Medina City Schools. And as Tina indicated, members of our Department of Instruction, including Tracy Swantek, Julia Gall, Katie Bober, Tina, and I have been invited to present at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and it is their Professional Learning Institute. And what's exciting about this conference and this opportunity is the conference aims to bring together leaders across the United States that are looking for ways to advance the profession in elementary education and early childhood education. So we're excited to be a part of this opportunity to network with other leaders that have a shared vision for advancing learner-centered innovation. Our presentation will focus on sharing with other districts the journey we have taken to promote 21st century learning across our elementary schools. We will share the steps we have taken, what we have implemented, to give other districts an opportunity to think about the work that they could replicate within their districts as well. Our team will be highlighting specifically our makerspace learning experiences and the impact that we have seen on advancing learning within the classroom as we have looked at some of the innovative ways to engage our students with the academic learning standards. We will also have a chance to share with this national audience the work that we're engaged with now around Portrait of a Bee and Deeper Learning Framework. It really is going to be an honor to share at a national level the stories of our amazing educators, the impact that we have seen on our students with other leaders within the United States. And we're looking forward to learning from them as well to think about some of the steps we can continue to take as a district. So I'm looking forward to joining our team, to sharing more work about within Medina City Schools and having the chance to really elevate those stories.
Another great opportunity that we have to share what we've been doing is with our Pbis program. And Matt and Sarah have been instrumental in moving the Pbis program through our district for the last 5 years. So Mr. Matt Matty is going to come up and talk about an opportunity he has to share what we have been doing.
All right, thank you, Tina. So yes, we continue to move our Pbis work forward as a district, and we always look forward to opportunities to share what we've learned on our journey with other districts. So I'm going to share a little bit about an opportunity we have tomorrow at the Summit County Educational Center. But first, I just want to provide a little bit of background because there's a lot of alphabet soup in education, and I want to share Pbis stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And what this is a proactive behavior framework that we use to reinforce positive behaviors, and also a framework designed to support students with any sort of behavioral challenge. So Pbis is a 3-tiered data-informed framework. So Tier 1 kind of represents the behavior supports and reinforcements provided to all students in a school building. And when implemented effectively, Tier 1 should support about 80 to 85% of our students in a building. The Tier 2 supports are in place for small groups of students that share similar behavior needs. So think of something like a social skills small group for students. And Tier 2 represents about 10 to 15% of students in a building. And then with Tier 3, being the supports we provide to meet the specific needs of individual students, and Tier 3 represents about 5% of students in a building. So we've been working for several years now on implementing our PBIS framework, and in 2019, the district was recognized by the state for our initial rollout of PBIS, and we had the opportunity at that time to present at the state PBIS showcase in Columbus. And then since then, we've had several opportunities over the years to present our work with districts in the region and across the state. So tomorrow, we were invited to present on a panel at the State Support Team regional meeting at the Summit County Educational Service Center. And we were asked to share our journey with this work and provide some feedback and ideas for other districts in the region undertaking similar work. And we were encouraged to share both our successes and our challenges because, needless to say, it has not been a perfect journey, and there still remains much work that we need to do. But we're looking forward to celebrating and sharing the good things that are going on with PBIS in Medina, and look forward to learning from other districts as well. And I also wanted to share that we're currently visiting all of our buildings to conduct our annual PBIS evaluation. We use a tool called the TFI, another acronym, which is the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. And we use that to assess the implementation progress of the framework at each tier across all of our buildings. So what we do is we conduct walkthroughs where we have an opportunity to talk with students and staff regarding their understanding of PBIS, and then we meet with the building PBIS team to complete the TFI tool, which is then used to identify priority areas that inform our action plans for the following school year. We're going to have more information in May to share regarding the progress of our schools this year following the completion of these evaluations. But one thing the state support team mentioned during our building visits this spring, is that many buildings across the region, many schools, have not been able to focus as much on PBIS because of all the challenges the last several years with the pandemic. So we do anticipate some gaps in our TFI data this spring that will need to be addressed. But we've been pleased to see that several of our elementary buildings that we've recently visited have maintained progress or even demonstrated some growth this year. So we're looking forward to seeing the outcomes of all of our spring TFI evaluations, and we'll be ready to take the steps necessary to move this work forward next year in what will hopefully be a full school year of normal, or at least a full school year of the new normal. So thank you very much, and are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, we're very proud of the work that we're doing and that we're going to continue to do in the future. But before I sit down, I did want to put in a plug because tomorrow the entire district will receive information about our summer enrichment camp, which will start on June 6th and go through July 1st. So every week in June will be a different session. And this year we decided to do something a little bit different with our summer school. We are going to focus on Portrait of a Bee competencies, and we're going to offer classes or courses that allow students to explore their passions, to try new things, to persevere through challenges, to collaborate with their peers, everything the Portrait of a Bee asks us to do. And we have both certified and classified staff teaching these courses, so that's really fun. And the courses are a wide range of things. We have a basketball camp, a STEM challenge camp, programming, congressional debate. We even have a turtle camp because one of our employees, is a turtle enthusiast and wants to share his passion for turtles with students. We have a fishing course. There's lots of great opportunities where students will be able to explore new things or continue to explore their passions. So again, from June 6th to July 1st, every week in June will be a different session. Students can sign up for one session or they can sign up for all four, so that's up to them. And that link again will be coming through an email tomorrow. Any questions?
I have one.
Okay.
I saw that you're going to have a tree leafing.
Tree keying? Yeah.
Tree keying. I hope they use the Spring Grove Arboretum up there. And they also have a video where you can go online and see all the different trees. So I just wanted to mention that if they don't know that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'll let her know.
I just wanted to thank you, Mrs. Cassidy and Mrs. Jackson and Mr. Matty, for all your hard work and recognition. It's very exciting to see the great things going on in our district and in the curriculum department and being recognized for that and sharing that with other districts. So thank you for your hard work for that. We're looking forward to May with the PBIS continuous updates, how the conference goes, as well as turnout for camp. We hope that it fills up.
Yeah, me too.
Thank
you
you
very much.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to throw one more thing out there for our curriculum department. In the next month or two, we are going to be discussing with the board attending the national conference in Houston for SOAR, for education, for 21st century educational learning and teaching for a leadership team here in the district. And we have applied through Amy Busby, communications department, as well as through our curriculum department to do a presentation on some of our work at that national conference, which we're still waiting to hear back on. So we really are diving into this work that we're doing and really trying to be collaborative in the way that we are approaching this work, and we are hopeful that we get the opportunity not only to get a team to attend that conference, but also actually participate in presenting and being leaders in that conference as well. And we are in the process of working on, Tina and I just met last week to talk about some of the direction that we're going to be heading next week in our continued work with Battelle and with the SOAR program as we expand the program. And part of the next step of this is looking at human resources as well, and we look at something like a portrait of a graduate, and those expectations aren't just for our students, but it's for our staff as well. And what do we look at when we look at hiring employees, and what kind of expectations do we have for ourselves as individuals that are working in the district and working with our students? So those are all conversations that we're going to be having in the not too distant future as we begin to continue to paint this picture. Thank you, Tina. The next item, not quite as happy, but important information to share with our board. As you know, the state has implemented or is in the process of implementing a new state budget, a new state funding system for school districts. And we've heard many times Mr. Chambers expressing passion and frustration towards the funding system or the lack of funding system here in the state of Ohio. And I concur with much, if not all, of what he often shares. Unfortunately, here in Ohio, the way that funding seems to work when it comes to schools and the funding of schools is that the funding of schools doesn't regularly seem like a priority. And rather than schools being at the top of the lists when the budget is made and funding is discussed, it tends to be at the bottom, and we see what money is left to go towards our students and education, which creates challenges when we're actually looking at the monies received by schools, and it creates the situations that we currently have in the state of Ohio with the high reliance on local tax dollars in order to fund our schools. And it's why we're in situations like here in our school district where we see such a large amount of our funding that's actually coming from local tax dollars rather than state dollars. What I want to share with the board today is that in our recent calculations with the new funding system, It is looking like we are looking at a reduction of approximately $2 million per year for the upcoming school years in state funding. That reduction in state funding obviously will be impactful over our overall state budget, and it's important to be aware of as we proceed with decisions in regards to personnel, curriculum, et cetera. $2 million is a lot of money. To keep it in perspective, we are dealing with an $80 or $90 million budget. So we are talking about a fairly large budget in regards to that $2 million. And like I said, the state funding portion of it is the smaller portion in regards to what we get from local taxes. But that's not to say that it's not a significant amount, especially when we look at the overall picture where we have been utilizing our savings over the course of the past 5 years, as we told the community we would, that we would not come to the community for new dollars until we needed new dollars. And we were in a very good position where we were able to save money, and we've been utilizing that money in order to expand programming, decrease class sizes at the elementaries, add additional classes at the middle schools as well as at the high school, add teaming back, just to name a few of the programs, and we're going to go into those in more details actually at our next board meeting when we present the new strategic plan. But we've really had an opportunity to expand programming here without asking for new monies. So as we move forward towards the next several years, that is something that we keep in mind as we are looking at new positions in the district and making recommendations to our board. It's not a situation where it stops us from our goals and our initiatives. However, it brings a heightened level of awareness as we make those decisions. At this time, we're not looking at moving up the levy cycle. We're still looking at a similar time frame to what we had discussed, which is approximately the 24-25 school year for needing new money. Which is beyond the time frame that we had presented to the board as well as the community when we had passed the last levy, which was not for new money. It was to keep the current money, the existing money that we had in place. That is something, though, that we're going to need to continue to monitor, and Mr. Chambers and I had talked about that this is something we are going to need to make sure we reevaluate on a regular basis to make sure where we are at. And I know as a COAT team, a central office team, this is something we had discussed and will continue to discuss as we're making decisions moving forward. I wanted the board to be aware that this was the situation in terms of the funding, so that you knew as we were making recommendations to you that you as board members could do your best in making your decisions. And I know that Mr. Chambers will have this reflected within all of his reports, probably already is reflected within his reports. The other challenge that I know Mr. Chambers would share with the public and with the board is that state funding is constantly fluctuating. So this is the situation right now. We literally could be in a completely different situation in a matter of months. For instance, I think we could go back 4 or 5 months and we had no idea that we could be looking at a $2 million reduction just 3 or 4 months ago. And depending on what happens in Columbus, that could head a completely different direction. And that's just the reality of the way school funding works in the state of Ohio. But we want to make sure the board has the most up-to-date information of where we're at right now. And that's the challenge we face as we attempt to make long-term decisions. Fortunately, right now, it's not something that is going to be overly impactful in the immediate, but again, is something to keep on the radar.
I have a question real quick, maybe for Mr. Chambers. Is this expected for the fiscal year 22-23 school year? Or are we going to see the effects of that right now?
No, the state hasn't fully implemented the Fair School Funding Plan, but what we have received this year is based on the plan as it is being paid out. It's not like it was, I want to say, 2 years ago when COVID hit and they dropped their budgets itself. They have not funded us to that. At that point, they overfunded us and dropped the monies. I believe it was in May of 2020. This year, they've slowly implemented the funding, and we are going to be getting everything that the plan allows. Let's put it that way. So no, it's not money that we have and have to give back to the state.
And I'm sure in May, when you do our 5-year forecast, it'll be reflected in there, in that.
That is item number 4 on my communications.
Thank you.
Aaron, I got a question. Mr. Chambers, I agree with Mr. Sable, because sitting on the finance committee with you for many years, it's always changing. It's frustrating with how the state funding works. But my question is, other districts, are they also facing similar cuts, 2 million, or is it based on how they rate the communities as far as their wealth?
The new plan is based on number of students, the valuation of properties, and the wealth of the district. So, as we've said, Medina is considered a wealthy district. We have declining enrollment from when I first began to now. It has declined. We also have valuations that, as you see sales going on with real property, our sales of homes, which determine valuations, have jumped over the past year. I'd say over the past year and a half, the sales have really jumped. You could buy a home. Okay, I'll be personal here. I bought a home for $160,000. 2 streets over, that same house, actually ours is 2 streets over, that same house is sold for $275,000 just this past year. So, and yeah, sales are out the roof, and that determines valuation. Even if we had steady student population, the wealth of the district would decrease the amount of funding that we get from the state.
And what's a real challenge that I think that people don't always realize is, even with the valuations going up, we are not receiving additional dollars in the local tax collection. And sometimes it's assumed, well, my property value is going up, the schools are receiving more, and that's not the case. We don't receive more when property values go up. We continue to receive the same. And at this time, we do have policies on the agenda that have gone through the policy committee, and they are on here for first reading. So I'd like to invite Dr. Kwolek to present those.
So I just want to quickly go over some of these. I think it's important to just take a moment to review our policy process for the community and for our board. We have a policy committee that meets every month. We met 2 months ago and started to look over these policies. We present them in draft form. We talk about the different choices that are available. Then we meet the following month after people have had time to review them, and then we determine if they're going to come on to the board for a first reading. So before they come to this board for a first reading, the policy committee, which involves 2 board members, Mr. Sable, Mr. Chambers, and myself, have already seen them for several months. So now they're here for a first reading, which means the board has time to look them over. They will be in the public section of our board agenda for today after this meeting if the board agrees to approve them for a
first reading. And so I take this opportunity just to review for the public why they're on for a first reading and to give you a little background information. I know the board's going to talk a little bit in board discussion about the public participation policy. We brought that to the board to look over based on some of the feedback around the country from public participation at board meetings, just to provide some clarity during the public participation section. And in particular, we wanted to allow an option for members of our community and our school community to have a preference for speaking first at a board meeting. So that's the change in this policy in particular. College Credit Plus will be one I probably will bring to you multiple times, and I think we have in the past. But a number of these policies are brought to you because they reflect the current state of the law, and they have to be approved to maintain accurate policies, and this is one of those. So based on an Ohio Revised Code change, it's an interesting thing that is being done, but if a male student participates in College Credit Plus, they're now required to register with Selective Services. So it's another way to force our male students to register with Selective Services. Again, we don't have a choice, it's just something that they do. Some of our female students find it interesting that it just still is a male registration thing. So blended learning is on here. This policy started when blended learning started, and at this point it's being brought to you because of a Senate bill that is asking that when you do include a blended learning option, that you include non-computer based learning as well, which is interesting, the irony in that, but they just want to have a diverse blended learning policy. So that was the change in this policy. And again, that's another one where we have to adopt this change to maintain Ohio law. The next one is our weapons policy. Again, another one where there were revisions in the state law and what is defined as a weapon. And so incendiary devices are included in this definition, and so that is why we're changing this policy. Grant funds is being revised, as Dave Chambers will share with you, and the Finance Committee. There are lots of times we have audits every year, and the auditors will look for things in your policies to be included in the policy. And this is an example where auditors are requiring some different things be in your policy provisions and being enacted. And so the Education Department is requiring some maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity be documented. What that means in regular terms is just that if you receive grant funding, you're often not allowed to use those to replace what you're already spending. So when you get grant funding, they want you to do something new with it, not replace taxpayer dollars, which is often a struggle because it'd be nice to be able to do that, to ask for less levy funding, but we're often not allowed to do that. The next one is cost principles, and that's again another policy we're looking at to change because of the maintenance of effort in the Education Department policies. So again, it's another policy that has to be maintained or changed to keep our records accurate. And there are specific prohibitions regarding things we can incur for telecommunications and video surveillance equipment. So again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but it's another policy that we really don't have a choice. That needs to be changed. 6320 is purchasing and bidding, and in order for our policies to line up, this is a policy we had to change to allow the superintendent and treasurer to approve purchases up to $50,000, and then after that piece they have to come to the board for approval. Again, everything eventually comes to the board, to a board meeting, but at this point they would be allowed to up to $50,000 do that prior. Procurement is another, again, the short term is Edgar policy, so there's specific prohibitions, again, regarding costs incurred for telecommunications and other things. Some of the policies are located in multiple areas. 6423 is use of credit cards. Again, when you use credit cards in a school district, there's a lot of parameters and requirements and specific procedures that have to be outlined. So we continue to update those procedures and make sure they're in line with state and federal policies. 7217 is weapons, again, adding incendiary devices. And then the last policy that we have for first reading is food service. And that was updated to look at conflicts of interest in terms of milk and milk substitutions. I also want to point out our committee had a discussion about some language in the policy regarding the Heimlich maneuver, and so I think it's important for everyone to know. One of our policy committee members brought that up, and we had further discussion with our principals that someone in every building during lunchtime is trained in the Heimlich, and we've actually had several staff in several buildings that I can think of in my 20-some years here use the Heimlich to save lives. Unfortunately, it's usually during hot dog time when hot dogs are for lunch, but that's why the policy committee is very useful too. We always look over things and make sure that the policies we have written are enacted. So again, this is the first reading, and if the board approves this, these will also be on for second reading next month, and then that's when they will become formal policies.
And we do not do or condone hot dog eating competitions. Next up, facilities and redistricting. We are continuing with the facilities and redistricting process as presented to the board at a board meeting or two ago. And the phase that we're currently in is we are presenting to our faculty and staff. We actually had our first presentation today over at Claggett Middle School. In addition, we are starting presentations at the building level with students. I know tomorrow morning I'm going to be meeting with high school students with Dr. Tadona to talk about facilities and redistricting. In addition, our first survey was sent out and closed on Friday. And I'd like to invite Ms. Busby up to share with the board and the community the survey results, which we'll also make available on the webpage that Ms. Busby started for facilities and redistricting.
All right, thank you. Good evening. As Mr. Sable mentioned, we are re-engaging all of our stakeholders in our redistricting and facilities discussion. And part of that process is we've completed a survey that was available to all of our stakeholders. So the survey period was April 4th through the 15th. And basically the questions were related primarily to district facilities and awareness of things that we've already accomplished in regards to redistricting and facilities. So the survey was well responded to. We had over 2,300 respondents, so that was great, and probably one of the highest surveys that we've had response to. To start the survey, we took a look at the demographics. Obviously, we want to know who's responding. So the first question was, what best describes you? And primarily it was parents or guardians of current students. Second was staff members, and third was current Medina City Schools students. But we did receive responses in a wide range of our stakeholders. Age bracket, primarily I was 35 to 54, so kind of that elementary working into middle school. Interestingly enough, though, we did get quite a few responses from our senior citizen groups, so that was really great to see that. One of the things that we wanted to accomplish with this survey was an awareness of things that we've already done. We have not had this discussion for quite some time. I think one of our last meetings was right before everything shut down with the pandemic. And so we wanted to understand where people were with this initiative. And one of the first questions was, are you aware that Medina City Schools has previously been studying the capacity of the district facilities, gathering data and information from the state since 2019, and most said that they had that awareness. Secondly, we wanted to talk about the fact that we've already done one survey, and people were kind of 50-50 on that. Some remembered, some did not, some were not sure. And then the other point of awareness that we wanted to maintain is that people understood that we have a new strategic plan coming up. And most people were very aware of that.
The next thing that we want to talk about is the facility infrastructure. And so we wanted to understand an overall opinion of the needs throughout the district with regards to facilities. And the first question was, do you agree or disagree that overall facility improvement and general facility infrastructure is in current need with existing facilities within the district? And 75% agreed with that. Keep going. The other thing that we wanted to take a look at was people's awareness or opinion of enrollment or capacity in our buildings. And the question was, are you aware that some of the buildings in the Medina City School District are at or approaching capacity while others have decreasing enrollment? And there was a great awareness of that. In addition, we wanted to know people's opinion or awareness of socioeconomic differences in the K through 8 buildings. And as you can see, there was a great awareness there as well. Then we got into the overall condition of all the buildings within the district and kind of put all the information there by building. As you can see, at the elementary level, there was a lot of no experience in the building. So these are maybe a little bit skewed, but it gives us an overall idea of what people think of the individual buildings. And then our final question was in regards to communication. Certainly we want to make it a point to reach as many stakeholders as possible. And the question was, how do you like to be communicated with or to? And the majority said electronic surveys, which this was one of those things. And then the next would be virtual meetings. So it tells us that people want to have the opportunity to not necessarily have to go to attend a meeting, but still want to attend and provide their input, but just more on a virtual standpoint. But in-person meetings is still popular. People like the idea of having a dedicated web page. I think it's easier to find that information. Other methods that people wanted to have us use would be email, text, and the idea of live streaming or recording the meetings so that they could watch them at their convenience. So this survey is providing us with initial groundwork as we proceed with future discussions with regard to redistricting facilities and what the community will support. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Busby.
Thank you.
I have one question, and I'm wondering, is it able to parse the data? So for those people that were not aware when we're measuring the awareness, to know if they are community members versus parents, because I'm just wondering if we need to then coordinate our communication directed to a certain stakeholder.
So if you look at the percentages of those that responded, I think that's how we can probably arrive at that information. So there was no, it was just, when you talk about awareness, it was just, are they aware or not aware? So yes and no questions. So I think, moving down the line, when we start to do additional surveys, maybe we can make that a little bit more prevalent.
Yeah, one of the things we were very careful about with this survey, and I actually had the opportunity to talk to some community members about this, is we didn't want to mislead people and ask them questions where there really weren't choices. Like, for instance, we need to redistrict. We have buildings that are reaching capacity or at capacity. We have buildings where there's room. So it really, the question of, do you want to redistrict? We know many people don't want to redistrict, so we didn't ask that question. But in terms of parsing out the data, I think we can take a look at that at the spreadsheet to see exactly where that varying information is coming from. I think the intent of this survey, though, wasn't really to dive down into the nitty-gritty, but to get some general information as we move forward. We're getting more specific information as we're going around right now and talking to the staff, which we're going to come back to the board with probably early this summer once we complete those presentations. And then really next school year, when we start the virtual conversations with the community and we're closer to actually picking a general plan, is I think when we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. But for me personally, there weren't any major surprises. It was good to see that people saw that we did have buildings reaching capacity and buildings that weren't. Part of the concern, especially going through the pandemic, is that you're involved in your building, you see that there's a couple empty classrooms, and you don't realize that there are buildings that are overflowing, or vice versa. And for there to be an awareness of that is important, or the equity piece as well. I think that was one of the questions, to realize that is an issue across the district. So now that there's an awareness, it's a question of how do we tackle these issues, and that's where the discussion comes in.
Thank you. I guess I was looking at, and it makes sense with the deeper dive, I was just thinking if we needed to communicate better with a certain group of stakeholders, but when I look back at the who answered, and it was almost 78% were parents and 13% are staff. So we're at 90%, if I do my math right, and still of that 90%, there is a percentage that are not aware that our facilities have staffing, or enrollment differences and things like that. That some are over capacity, some are not. So even within our own community of parents and teachers, it looks like overwhelmingly, yes, there's a higher percentage that are aware, but it does look like we do have some work that we need to do. So great start. Thank you.
And the last item, I'm sorry, Andrew.
No, it's all right. It's good that we got a lot of responses, but you're seeing a lot of people that already have kids in the district are going to, or staff members, but the district's pretty big and there's a lot of people that don't have kids, and so maybe trying to figure out how to target some of those people that didn't respond in the future would be good too, I think, because they're going to be required if we go to them for things.
Yep, and we've actually been having that conversation, and I know Ms. Busby already has some ideas and has reached out to the chamber in working with the chamber, and in the past we've actually gone and met with those outside organizations, and that's something we obviously haven't had the luxury of doing recently. Yeah. And the last item I have for discussion is a Board of Education summer retreat. Spoke with Becky and Ron about holding a summer retreat. Typically, we would do either a half day or full day, depending on the amount of topics that we have to cover. So I would say that's to be determined at this point. Right now, I would say we will probably have plenty to cover, especially with the redistricting facilities conversation on the table. But we were looking at maybe mid-July to hold that retreat, and wanted to see if there was a week time frame that maybe would work good with the board. And I don't know that we would hammer down a specific date now, but wanted to see if there were any specific dates that board members are already aware of where you might be out of town. Typically in the retreats, our entire COAT team participates in those, so we do have an expanded team that participates, and those are, just so our board and our public knows, those are meetings that are open to the public. They are work sessions, though. We work all day, so it's not like a formal meeting like this.
Mr. Sable, when would you like the board members to get you dates to start putting something together?
Yep, if you could get me dates by the end of this month so we can start planning in May. So by the end of April, so that gives you a couple weeks. We purposely avoid June because we're working with our principals to close down the buildings. And then in August is just an extremely busy month for us in terms of getting things back rolling with hiring personnel. So July tends to work best for a board retreat. I do know that that's a big vacation month, though, and it is administratively as well. So mid-July came up working off our calendars around vacations and things like that. So we want to try and work around your calendars as well and see what we can work out. So the middle of July, in terms of administrators, seem to work best.
But Mr. Sable, are we talking about like going somewhere or keeping it right here in Medina?
We would keep it right here in Medina.
Okay.
Probably get lunch, something like that.
Okay, Mr. Chambers?
Thank you very much. Talk about the March financials. The district bank balance decreased by $1.8 million in March to $77.2 million. This is $3.075 million below last year at this time. The general fund revenues were above last March by $1.4 million. All revenue sources, except our state foundation funding, which we referred to in prior communications here, account for this increase. General fund expenditures were above last March by $627,000. All but purchase services and supplies account for this increase. The sales tax fund is down to $3.01 million. The district spent approximately $170,000 with the majority of expenditures on camera systems at Claggett and Root. The Rec Center Capital Fund balance increased to $260,000. The only monies that came in or went out were the transfer that the board approved at their last meeting. The district received $28,000 for investment income. The total collected for the current fiscal year is approximately $278,000 below last fiscal year at this time. And finally, the general fund true days cash is estimated to be 235 days. This is down from February by 7.8 days and below last year by 18.77 days. Questions? On today's agenda, there's a resolution for investment of commercial paper and bankers' acceptance. This was spoken about briefly by our investment advisor, Ryan Nelson from Red Tree. Then during our finance committee, one of our members, Jean Pritchard, asked to discuss it during our finance committee. I invited Ryan to discuss with the finance committee members at that time, and he was peppered with questions by Bert Hummel. And so Bert was satisfied that the commercial paper, just as Ron Ross was satisfied in prior years, that commercial paper would be a good tool for the district to use. Commercial paper is a form of unsecured short-term debt commonly issued by companies to finance their payrolls, payables, inventories, and other short-term liabilities. The state allows the district to get commercial paper for a total of 270 days, no more. Most of the time, commercial paper lasts less. The commercial paper is also, we can only invest up to 40%, which is on the resolution that you will be looking at today. However, in speaking with the Finance Committee, they want to start and dip their toes in slowly. I know when Ron was on the Finance Committee, we were talking about possibly $1 or $2 million at the most at this point. It may grow a little. I don't see 40% of our investments being in commercial paper. I don't see 15% of our investments being in commercial paper. So I will leave it at that. Any questions on commercial paper? Next, we have an engagement letter with the Local Government Services Agency for Gaap conversion. I was asked by Ms. Parkhurst here if this was necessary, and we are audited on a yearly basis. What Gaap conversion does is we operate on a cash basis. What Gaap conversion does is puts all our numbers basically into a business form. It'll put it on an accrual basis that businesses, you could then compare us as a business to, I use GM, but the numbers are much different with GM, much bigger. But you could compare our business to any other business in the state of Ohio. So yes, it is a vendor that we need. As I say, it's on a yearly basis, so I just wanted to put that out there for you that if you have any questions, we could get the LGS, which is related to the state auditor's office, to answer your questions. And finally, number 4, our May forecast. I just wanted to put a reminder out there that we are going to be presenting the forecast here at the upcoming meeting. So apparently it's going to be a long meeting. With my forecast, I try and keep it to 5 minutes or less. I was at a meeting here with the Northeast Ohio treasurers, and one of the treasurers that was presenting said he goes through his entire forecast. 2.5 hours later, they're done with the forecast. I don't think you guys want to experience 2.5 hours of going through a forecast. So, no, okay. And that's okay. I don't want to present for 2.5 hours either. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. At this time, we have board communications. If board members have any items they would like to share.
Okay, I'll go. Before spring break, I went over to Blake and got to see Zombies, the musical. The 4th graders presented. It was really cute. It was the first school-wide assembly that they had in 2 years. I'd like to remind everybody the foundation Run for Fun is Friday, May 6th. You can register right now. I think there's like 7 or 8 days left. Magic Gives Back was an excellent production, I think last Saturday, and was well attended. National Honor Society induction is going to be tomorrow evening at the high school at 7 o'clock. And then last, I'd like to thank all the principals for all their hard work with the newsletters. It's very informative, and they send them out monthly, and I hope parents read them because there's a lot of information. Tells you what's going on in the school district. And right now, as school wraps up, there's a lot of concerts and art shows and different things. So, please look in your newsletter and support the kids. And at the same time, thank you to the teachers and the support staff for keeping the schools going the last couple of years. And don't forget that Showtime is coming up in the end of May. Thanks.
I don't have a whole lot. We had a facilities meeting, let's see, about 2 weeks ago. A lot of stuff going on with that. A lot of improvements with roofs and all kinds of things on that nature. I know that the after prom is going on in earnest only because my wife is involved with it and I got voluntold I had to help as well, which is fine. But there's a lot going on there, and from kind of a little bit of a personal perspective, it's kind of interesting to watch your children choose colleges, and there's a lot of seniors, I'm sure, that are going through the same things right now, and my son and a lot of his friends, and them not really wanting to go, but knowing that they're getting kicked out the door too. But so we got a lot of good kids every year, but that's about it. So
I just want to continue my appreciation for the staff, that everything that happens in the district comes from you all. And and it happens every day. And it does not go unnoticed. And so we try to, like Gene said, there's a lot going on this time of year. We try to get to as many things as we can. But we do appreciate everything you're doing every day, grinding it out and doing it for the love of our kids and giving them an outstanding education. So I truly appreciate all your hard work and continuing your efforts to move the district forward. It's much appreciated. And I hear a lot of good things in my circle about how great the district is. A lot of good comments. So much appreciated. Thank you. 10 times over.
Thank you. I just have a few items. The curriculum committee met last week and discussed the summer experience enrichment camps. I'm sorry, Tina, I can't remember the exact name. Summer enrichment camps, thank you. And I know that the parents that sit on that committee were very excited for those opportunities to be provided for our students. So we do hope a lot of students take advantage of those opportunities when they come out tomorrow. I did want to remind or let the public be aware that the Finance Committee does include 2 board members, as well as Mr. Chambers, Mr. Sable, and community members who have experience in finance and business. I know Mr. Chambers mentioned Mr. Humble, and he is a retired CPA here in the community. So just wanted to make the community aware of the people that are sitting on the committee and reviewing the policies, finance policies, and information that Mr. Chambers presents. Additionally, the policy committee met, and regarding some of the policies that Dr. Qualick spoke about, 2 things I want to mention. A lot of this, like Dr. Qualick mentioned, these are changes we have to make. We really don't have a choice about this. The purchasing limits, that, if you notice, that was increased to $50,000. That is per the Ohio Revised Code limits as well. I believe some of those we can go even higher, but the committee chose with the $50,000. And then regarding the public participation bylaw for the board, that is something that was brought to us in the fall, actually, or winter time. We decided to wait till we had the full new board in place, since that is our bylaw to review. And it was important for us. A lot of those changes, again, were required, but it was important for us to recognize that we do give or may give priority to residents when it comes to public participation. We know we have staff that live outside the district, and we want them to be able to participate as well, but we want to make sure that our residents do have a priority. And if the board decides to approve those for a first reading, please, at any point in time, as board members, as you're going through those, please reach out to any of the committee members if you have any questions about any of those. The last thing I did want to mention is the board retreat that Mr. Sable brought up. I did want the new board members to know that we did do this a few years ago. Probably, Mr. Sable, when you first got here, I think. So it's been 5 years or so. It was very valuable. That day was a full day, and I thought it was a very valuable experience. Mr. Ross can have some input too, but if any of the new board members have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us. I hope that we're able to do something this summer with that, since we have many new board members and lots of exciting things coming up in the district. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one question. Mr. Chambers, we're eliminating some finance committee meetings. Do you have that on the agenda somewhere that I missed?
No, I was going to speak to the full committee on that.
Oh, okay.
I know
All right.
that
we have some adjustments to some other committees that we're going to include on here as
all
well.
right. Thank you.
Ms. Pargers, can I add one thing? So, my neighbors, it's a funny thing, everybody's slowly coming out of hibernation, kind of. And there were some good comments made about the new course that was being offered, the service course. And they thought it was a great idea. And so just wanted to mention that. Of course, when they see me, it's always school talk. So I just wanted to share that with everybody, because it is a great idea. And again, well done.
Thank you. At this time in the agenda, we've reached the point for public participation. No one had signed in to speak, so we are going to go ahead and just waive the reading of those rules, if everyone is okay with that. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the treasurer's action items then.
Yes, if it pleases the board, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the March 2022 Treasurer's Report. Number 2, supplemental to permanent appropriations. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following supplemental to the 21-22 permanent appropriations. We have 3 minor changes at the building levels, and then you have a major change for our medical benefits. The district has been hit hard over the past year and a half with medical benefits, and budgeting for this year was not nearly enough, so we're looking at increasing our appropriation by $1.3 million. Number 3, your Gaap engagement letter. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the engagement of the Auditor of State Local Government Service to compile the annual financial statements of the Medina City School District as of and for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, and issue an accountant's report thereon in accordance with statements of standards for accounting and review services issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
Make a motion to approve the treasurer's action items, G1 through 3.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Ross and Mr. West. Are there any questions or comments from the board regarding these action items? Okay, hearing none, roll please.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Pritchard?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have action item resolution. Approval of the use of commercial paper and/or banker's acceptance, whereas the Ohio Revised Code authorizes any Board of Education to authorize by a 2/3 vote of its members investments by its treasurer of up to 40% of interim monies in certain notes and obligations. And whereas the treasurer of the Medina City Schools has completed required training for making the type of investments authorized by the Ohio Revised Code, the type and amount for which training has been approved by the Treasurer of State, now therefore be it resolved by the Medina City School District Board of Education, at least 2/3 of all members elected hereto concurring, that the state is authorized to invest up to, that the treasurer is authorized to invest up to 40% of the interim monies available for investment in either commercial paper or banker's acceptance as determined by the treasurer in the manner described in the Ohio Revised Code.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Mr. Ross, are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First item up tonight is donations. As usual, we have several donations for our maker spaces, again, from our generous parents and PTOs. I just had somebody ask me last week, how do we continue to maintain supplies in our maker spaces? Somebody from another school district. And I told them we've been very fortunate in terms of the support we've gotten from our community and our parents. In addition, I also wanted to point out an anonymous donation to our athletic department of almost $2,500. And some of you, if you've attended a baseball game, may have noticed lawn chairs in our dugout. That is because we have a donation for a new athletic bench going into the dugout for our baseball players. So we appreciate the anonymous donor in support of our baseball program. Second is service agreements. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreements. The first one on here is for A.J. Giuliani. A.J. Giuliani is a keynote speaker for the opening day in service on August 15th, 2022. AJ Giuliani fits within the framework of the 21st century education and deeper learning. We are excited to be able to have the opportunity to have him come and not only teach our staff, but also motivate our staff at the beginning of the school year. He is an author, and we are going to be doing a book study administratively, as well as with our curriculum committee, which includes our board members, as well as our parents and our community members. And we've already invited our curriculum committee to join us on opening day for his presentation. In addition, I want to extend that book to our board members. We are going to get copies, and we'll make that available for all of our board members. And every year we invite our board members to opening day. But it's going to set off our school year with a great philosophy and excitement in regards to what we're doing, and it's going to be relevant to all of our educators, whether they're working in our cafeteria, working in the bus garage, or working in a classroom, in terms of what we need to do as educators to provide the best education in the 21st century for our students. So I'm excited for this opportunity for our staff, and it's something that they have asked for from us in their feedback in regards to past opening days and presentations. In addition, there are multiple contracts for special education on the agenda as well. All of these contracts are contracts that we have historically held for special education purposes and per students' IEPs. You will see that we have a few contracts that are increases in the contracts. This is due to an increase of services and students that are going within that are requiring services within the contracts per their IEPs. The way that special education services work is that Mina works very hard within her department to provide services within the district whenever possible. We are very fortunate here in Medina City Schools, where we have outstanding special education services. And we actually provide a very wide range of services that many districts aren't able to provide. A lot of that has to do not only because we're awesome, but also because of our size. But there are some specialized services that we're just not able to provide, so we need to contract those services out. And that has to do with the cost benefit of those services, of providing them internally versus providing them externally, and that's part of the work that Mina does in her department. And she does come to Dr. Kwolek and I if we get in a situation where maybe it's time to bring this service into the district, and we have those discussions to bring it in service, because when we can do that, it's not a bad thing, because it's nice to be able to oversee directly the services that we're providing our students. But we do have a lot of confidence in the contractors we work with, and I have 100% confidence in the work that Mina does, and that's what we have here in terms of the recommendations of these special education contracts. Next, we have a change order request for Sidney Fenn Roof Restoration Project. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the change order request for additional work to be performed on the Sidney Fenn Elementary School Roof Restoration Project to add an additional layer of hot asphalt membrane prior to the restoration system. And with the Fenn roofing project, we had talked about this when this was first presented, and this was discussed within the facilities committee. We actually, when we were looking at the roofing project at Fenn, had a couple options in terms of directions that we could go in terms of a more cost-effective more short-term approach versus a more costly long-term approach. We did elect to go with the more short-term approach simply because we are having the discussion about what we're doing with facilities and redistricting, and Fenn was one of the facilities that was identified by the OFCC as needing work. So we didn't want to put the long-term money into the facility. However, part of the roofing project is, even though it's more of a shorter-term project, they do extensive studies on the roofing because they want to make sure they do it right. And they identified some additional work that needs to be done. This is still under the cost of what the longer-term project and costs would be. But again, we want to do our due diligence, and even with the less expensive, shorter-term approach, we want to make sure it's done right. So they're recommending some additional costs, which I'm recommending to the board this evening. Policies for consideration. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following revised policies for first reading. The policies will be presented to the board for final approval and potential adoption at the May 22 Board of Education regular meeting, and these were all presented by Dr. Kwolek earlier this evening. Several field trips on the agenda tonight. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following overnight field trips in compliance with Policy 2340. We have 2 athletic trips, one for April 22nd, which is actually coming up this weekend for girls lacrosse, and then we have a girls soccer scrimmage coming up on August 5th. Those are both down in Columbus. And then looking into next school year, approximately a year from now, the choir is looking at a trip to Disney World. Typically, the band and the choir rotate their years of trips. In the past, the choir has gone to New York City, so they are looking at adjusting that trip and going to Florida this round. Number 6 is a tuition waiver certificates for Capital University. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Capital University student, teacher, and field experience tuition waiver certificates for Chantel Patru and Kelly Miller for serving as cooperating teachers for a Capital University student for the 21-22 school year. Next, we have Performing Arts Center box office staff and Usher hourly rate increases. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Performing Arts Center box office staff and Usher rate be increased to $10 per hour effective April 20th, 22, to be consistent with athletic ticket seller rates and to be above Ohio's minimum wage rate. If you'll remember earlier this year, with the increase in the minimum wage, we had increased several rates across the district. This is one we had not increased, so we would like to put this in line with the other rates that were increased earlier this year. Personnel, it is recommended that the following personnel items are approved per completion of all required paperwork to the Director of Human Resources as required and requested. It's important to point out that the reason why this is long is we have many extracurricular contracts that are on the agenda here this evening. Last board meeting, many supplemental contracts were non-renewed, as has been common practice for contracts in the district. Those are recommended for renewal on this agenda. Any contracts that are not being recommended for renewal is simply because the position still needs to be filled. It could be for multiple reasons. It could be due to the individual resigning and no longer wanting to fill the position, retiring. It could be the need for moving in a different direction for filling that position. Any questions or comments from board members?
we're non-renewing all those substitutes?
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Ross.
Oh,
We
yeah,
need
that's
a
right.
motion first.
Make a motion to approve superintendent's action items I 1 through 8.
Thank
I
you.
second.
Thank you. Comments or questions now?
So those certificated substitutes, we're non-renewing all of those folks?
Yep, and they're reapplying, rehired on an annual basis.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions or items to discuss? I also did just want to thank Mina for all the work. I know you put a lot of work into all of those. There's a lot of contracts, and I appreciate the work and diligence it takes to get those. And there were a couple on here that are multiple year, and I'm guessing that was done to maybe save us some money to get locked in on some prices. So thank you for that and for all that you do for the district. If there's no other questions or comments, Mr. Chambers, will you call roll, please?
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkers?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, or compensation of a public employee or official, to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are the subject of pending or imminent court action, and preparation for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
I'll make a motion to consider.
For all that, thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. West.
for what you just said.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. If there are no questions or comments, I will note that the board will not be taking any action when we return out of executive session.
Are we inviting anybody?
Mr. Chambers will call roll, please.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and be safe out there in case it's still snowing. Hopefully it'll be 80 by this weekend.